does this. Oh my God, this works. Look at this. This is absolutely insane. Do you guys see what my microphone is? Do you see what my microphone is? Okay, sorry. I'm going to use the other mic now. So welcome to part 2 of our CIMM West event. As you will see, the room is set up a little bit differently. The goal of this part of the day is for open dialogue, roll up your sleeves, kind of get into a town hall mode. What is also happening is some people left their stuff upstairs, and so some people are bringing their stuff back downstairs so that we can get started. This is actually a microphone, and I am super excited about this. So first we have a presentation from Kate to talk about sort of AI and content provenance. I thought it was really important to have her, come have us think about AI and content in a way that we probably don't think about it. Like we think about measurement, we think about analytics, we think about figuring out how to target people. But what about actually making sure that the content that they see is valid, is truthful, also maybe is actually created by the company that says it was created by. So that's one part of the conversation. Then we're gonna have a panel about AI and measurement. And then right after that panel, the reason that this room is set up this way is, well, because we want everybody to talk amongst themselves and share and kind of get involved. And then we want you to share your ideas with the rest of the audience. And so literally, they promised me that you can throw this and it won't hurt anyone if they get hit with it. But essentially it's like, hey, tossing the microphone so that different people can hear different parts of the conversation. So without further ado, I am going to, I'd like to introduce Kate Kay, who's the Deputy Director of the World Privacy Forum. But more important, not more importantly, I've been a fan of Kate's for many years. I'm a former journalist. Kate is a former journalist in terms of advertising and marketing and technology. And one of the things that Kate has always done is sort of, in our industry where there's competing interests, she's always pushed for the truth. And she's always pushed her publications and pushed the companies that she's worked with to do better and be better and think more about the data that we're collecting and consuming. And so without further ado, I'd like to bring up Kate Kay.
Why, thank you. What a fantastic introduction. I'm really excited to be here today. And I want to share with you some of my recent research. So at World Privacy Forum, one of the areas that I focus on is governing AI governance. And so I want to talk to you today about tracing and measuring trust in media. Before that, I'm going to talk just briefly about my background. So for over 20 years, I was a reporter reporting for publications including Advertising Age, Digiday, way back in the day, ClickZ, when there was a little more of a robust newsroom there. And more recently, I moved on. I kind of transitioned from, the world of data-centric tech in relation to AI, in relation to marketing, advertising, media, into covering AI a little more closely. And that was at a publication called Protocol, which was an offshoot of Politico. Unfortunately, it shut down very suddenly at the end of 2022. And I took a few months and freelanced and then moved on to my current role, which is at World Privacy Forum. And we're a public interest research nonprofit organization. We're nonpartisan. We don't do any lobbying or advocacy work or anything like that. What we do is deep research that informs an audience, usually of policymakers and lawmakers, but also people like you hopefully pay attention. Maybe some privacy council people that you work with might check out some of our work. And so one of the things that I, again, focus on a lot these days is governing AI. What is that going to look like? How does what policymakers write up and put into a law, what does that look like in practice? So one of the areas of that, the sub areas, I guess, that I've researched a lot lately is content provenance and the idea of tracing and measuring trust in media. So we all know, as just, whether or not you're in this media industry or not, you are encountering all sorts of media that you might not know is trustworthy. You're not sure, right? We all are experiencing that. And so that's one issue. There's also this issue of creative works being protected in the face of AI, and when it comes to training data and all sorts of just copyright-related concerns in general kind of becoming more exacerbated with this new AI situation we're in. And so those are the two things that I think are kind of the impetus for why the type of tools that I'm going to talk about today are being explored more and becoming more of interest, and that's content provenance. So imagine if every photo, every video, every business document, every audio file, every music file that you encountered or that you created or that you put out there distributed had embedded in it or attached to it, there we go, or attached directly to it information that shows its provenance, that shows its origin, how it was created, where, when, things like that, and how it's been modified over time. Has it been edited? What kinds of software were used in that process? And all sorts of other kind of information. That's what content provenance tools do. They are intended to automatically produce that kind of provenance information and make sure that it's there present as part of that content file as it moves around the information ecosystem. So these kinds of content, this kind of information and these kinds of content provenance tools are starting to be baked into platforms. So maybe it's a social media platform or an ad platform. Might be a piece of software that may be a graphic design software or audiovisual software that's used to create videos or create an image. Generative AI software, and also a camera or a device. So we're starting to see this happen, and I want to show you just some quick examples of what the everyday user might experience when they're viewing this information. Because again, one of the promises of this content provenance stuff is that the everyday person can get some sense of the trustworthiness of the information that they're checking out online, right? Or in whatever platform they're looking. And so these are some examples here. One's of a photograph. And here's the thing. You would be online, maybe looking at a video, looking at an image, and you would see a little icon at the top. You'd click on it. It would expose a dialog box or kind of a box of information. Like, this image was generated using AI. OpenAI was part of the process. Maybe it's a photograph, and it provides information about the actual photographer and the date that they took the photo. And then there's most likely a bunch of other information that is there that's not necessarily exposed to the everyday user, but is accessible to, other data people. So what are these tools built to do? And what do they actually measure? It's really important not to make assumptions here, because while these kinds of content provenance tools that are being built are intended to trace, they're intended to automate that provenance data and that provenance information and trace it. They're not intended to detect AI. So they're not looking for clues, like, some weird pixelated thing or something that it's trying to sniff out whether or not an AI tool might have been used to create this video, or is this a deep fake or isn't it? That's not what they're doing. They're automating this provenance information and then enabling the tracing of it. They're also not built to detect whether or not certain content, maybe copyrighted content, was used in an AI model that then spit out that, that little generative AI cat image or whatever it is. So Those are two things they're not. So like I said, there's some caveats here. So to understand how these tools measure, we really have to peel back the onion another layer to the metadata layer. And the metadata layer is where the content provenance information lives. So don't worry, I'm not going to share with you any more of my life story here, but I wanted to show you this photo because this is something I have up on my fridge at home. It's me, my grandmother, and my mom in that snazzy plaid jacket. And so, I was looking at it and I realized, oh wow, this is exactly what I'm talking about in this presentation here. Look at the corner. There's a date, and it says 8/23/97. That's when the photo was taken. So yeah, it tells me how old I was, how old we all were, gives me an idea of where we all were at the time. But it's also an early piece of content provenance metadata, automatically generated by the camera that was used to take that photo. Content provenance metadata is definitely evolving. And so let's dig in a little bit to what might be in it today and what you measurement people might start seeing available to you in terms of the kind of data that you could see. Creator names, identifiers of content creators, precise geographic information. There's all sorts of geographic coordinates outside of just lat-long data that might be baked into this stuff. Camera and device identifiers. So the device or the camera that actually created that was used in the creation process. Maybe identifiers are just information related to the software that was used to either create the content or modify it later on. There's also going to be information that is a little more subjective, right? So I'm thinking what we're going to start seeing, this is in my research and also just knowing kind of the industry and how it tends to operate, we're going to start seeing trust scores and trust labels. So we're going to start seeing, somebody in the identity resolution conversation mentioned the idea of rating data, rating the quality of data. This is another example of a type of rating that we might see. We might see a trust rating or a score, an algorithmic score that is embedded in this piece of content, and it says, well, according to all the information we have in this provenance metadata, the scoring process says this piece of content is 92% trustworthy. How do we define how trust is measured? What are the criteria there? There's a lot of open-ended questions right now about that. So another thing my research is showing is that these tools might also incorporate pre-approval of certain media entities, certain content providers, certain platforms that are used in that media creation or distributing that media or that content. So literally like a VIP list for trustworthy media entities or trustworthy content creators, and who's not on that list. What happens there? Is there an adverse impact on that potential trust score? Maybe you're a content creator. Maybe you're somebody who's taking photos of something or whatever kind of information you want to put out there, and you have an old phone. Your device doesn't connect to this content provenance ecosystem. It doesn't have software embedded in it that's enabling this automated provenance data to be embedded into the content. Are you given maybe a lower trust score, or the information you're putting out there is not given a high trust score because it just doesn't even participate in this ecosystem? We can really expect these trust signals or scores or whatever they're going to be to start, winding their way through all sorts of other systems. A score could maybe be used in another process to do some other kind of measurement. In your world, there's a possibility that you would be looking to some of these measures and incorporating them into something that you're building. Who knows, right? So we don't really know yet what's going to happen downstream to this metadata. And there are some other really important things that I want you to consider here. So brands, media companies, independent creators, independent journalists, musicians, authors, all sorts of people really want to have a piece of content that they were part of the creation of, or that they own or hold the rights to. They want that content to be directly connected to identity, to a person, to the person who created it, directly connected to their brand, directly connected, right? And so that's a constituency that is very interested in these content provenance tools today. And there's probably people in your world who are talking about this stuff. Because part of the goal is this might help protect intellectual property, or at least trace where it's moving around, and are we getting our fair share here. But there's a whole other constituency of people who could actually be at risk if content is directly connected to them. And that's really anybody who wants to create or share or even view risky information or controversial information. Maybe they're a whistleblower and they want to share some evidence, but they don't want to be connected to that content that has embedded information in it. They might be a domestic violence victim, or they might be somebody who's trying to document situation in a war zone. There's all sorts of people who could actually be put in danger if a piece of content can be directly traced back to them. So data access and control is really important here. I know from a business standpoint, it's important. And I imagine that everyone here would be thinking about that, right? Who's going to be able to access this metadata? And also, who's going to be able to access information about who's interacting with the content provenance metadata? Let's say somebody, someone is trying to just get a sense of how trustworthy a piece of information is that might be considered risky. It might be information that they don't really want the world to know they're looking at for whatever reason, but they, so they expose that metadata and they get a sense of, okay, this is trustworthy or not, or here's who took the photo, or whatever it is. What happens to that information? I consider that metadata, right? What happens to that interaction with the provenance data? So that's an area, we don't know we don't know much about that data access and control question. We also really don't know, again, coming out of that identity resolution conversation, we don't know what kind of identity systems might be used in conjunction with content provenance tools. And we don't know exactly how if people will be given the opportunity to kind of opt out of this, or if they will only be asked to opt into it. We don't know exactly how that's going to play out. Right now what's happening is these products are kind of just starting to be built, and they certainly haven't made their way through the ecosystem. They're not like an everyday thing that you see when you're looking at a YouTube video or when you're online, right? So we don't know yet, and those are some big questions. So I'm going to wrap it up here and leave you with a couple questions to ask yourself. How would you assess content provenance tools and their trust measurements? What would be important to you? Can these tools be designed and used in ways that prevent unintended consequences or unwanted data access? So if you'd like to learn any more about measuring AI governance tools, I encourage you to check out worldprivacyforum.org, and especially a report that we put out in December of 2023, where we looked at tools governing AI that are put out actually by governments and non-governmental organizations. We call the report Risky Analysis. And the report really looks at, we did a survey of these kinds of tools and some of the problems that exist in them and some ways to improve them. I also encourage you, hopefully, to find me on X, LinkedIn, Blue Sky. I'm Kate K Reports. And also, please stop me and say hello and share what you think about all this. Thank you.
We're just gonna we got some time for a couple of questions.
Yeah, awesome.
We also have questions. If the audience does have questions, I was serious. That blue cube is a mic, and we can literally throw it around the room. So if you have a question, we're game for that. So, I mean, Kate, you said a bunch of stuff, and I wish I could have given you 45 minutes to get super deep in the weeds, but you said a couple of things. The first thing that came to mind that you said was, do you think our industry is gonna opt people out or opt people in? Let's be clear. Everybody's getting opted in. Everybody's getting opted in instantly, and they're going to have to opt out, because that's how unfortunately, I think that's how the advertising industry has worked for quite some time. And so I think I'm being a little facetious right now, but I think the minute one of these tools sort of is linked to an identity solution or linked to something that can sort of track consumer interest or track measurement or track the performance of a campaign, people are going to be opted in.
Yeah, so I have a few things to say to that, because I have been really watching this quote-unquote standards development in content provenance, and so there's some standards that are being built, and on top of those standards, that's where the products get built based on those standards. And at least one of the standards is saying, this is only going to be opt-in, don't worry, right? Because they have already people who represent some of those marginalized communities that I talked about, right? Saying, we don't want to force people who are maybe living in a situation where there's an authoritarian government or there's some major risk to their lives if they are connected to a video or a photo or whatever. So that is an issue, and it's definitely, in the standards they're saying this should be opt-in. What happens when it starts to work its way through the digital universe? And what happens if a legislator has a law that says, this has to be, we have to make sure we know who is creating this content. And the social media platform says, well, they're kind of forcing us. Or maybe there's incentives provided to the person who is posting online or sharing an image or whatever, and maybe it's not that they have to, but they're kind of prodded to, or there's sort of just a process that leads them there. So yeah, there's all sorts of potential for that.
I think it's interesting, the push and pull between that, right, though, because you want to protect people's privacy and their safety and their sort of sovereignty over their identity.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you also highlighted that there are artists and musicians and people who have a financial interest in making sure that the content that they created is traced back to them. So how do you, if you have a crystal ball, how do you kind of foresee those two competing interests?
Yeah, well, I think there could be, in terms of developing products around this, there could be approaches that are geared toward that constituency of people who want to protect their intellectual property and want to have their names connected to, or want to have their identities connected to pieces of content versus other people. It's going to play out in terms of not being penalized if you don't want to participate in this, in the content provenance tool world. I think it's a really tough question.
So shifting gears to kind of one of the things that made me want to have you, do this conversation, there's a big discussion around metadata in our industry and sort of who can see what and who can share what and who can pass what. And so there's laws like VPPA that sort of prevent people from sharing certain signals. And how do you see kind of the content provenance signals playing into that? Are content provenance signals, do you think they're going to be protected? Do you think they're going to be sort of, It's a two-part question. One, do you think content provenance signals are going to be sort of protected or legislated? And then the second question is some of the data that we already collect about content going to be useful from a content provenance level?
Yeah, I mean, the second question I'll take first, because I mean, certainly it could be. It might factor in, right? It might be something that, you know, the way this world works is that it's not just that this tool exists on its own. People, I mean, who knows what kinds of APIs might be available. And then there's products built on top of all of this, and then what information is meshed together and used to do all sorts of things. So I think this series of questions kind of relates to like downstream repurposing, potential repurposing of some of this information, downstream uses. Those are where a lot of the questions are in terms of like, so there's already legislation that actually has passed here in California that is requiring companies that have generative AI models, probably just the big ones, to build these content provenance tools, to build tools that, I'm sorry, not content provenance, to build AI detection tools, but I think that have some connection to content provenance. And so that's one thing that's happening. And I think in terms of how those laws are implemented, there's an opportunity to, you know, really be thoughtful about how the metadata from these systems can be or should be restricted, or how repurposing could be at least refined or narrowed in terms of uses.
Anybody else have a question for Kate? Yes, great. Michael. Evan, will you toss the
catch?
mic?
Very interesting stuff. I'm curious, kind of along the lines of what Tamiko was just asking about, is what about bad actors and fraud? How do you see that playing out?
Oh, well, that's a whole area I didn't talk about. And it's a major caveat, because, you know, people who are looking, there are researchers who are like forensics researchers, you know, people who maybe really for a living, like they're the ones who go to, you know, testify at court about the provenance of a photograph or whatever. And they're kicking the tires on this stuff and saying, I can create a fraud that's labeled as trustworthy in this system. And, you know, so there's definitely potential. Also, as, you know, just as everything becomes more and more complex, there's going to be a lot of questions about, you know, whether or not these things can really keep up, I guess. So yes, fraud's definitely an issue. There are a lot of people looking at that. And bad actors, you know, that's, I mean, the way these content provenance, the standards are being developed today, what they're really kind of focused on is the good actors. They're focused on the participants who want to be part of this ecosystem, who want to adopt products or you know, these approaches to automating the metadata, having it be part of what they're building, recognizing those signals, whatever it is. And there's going to be people who, you know, have access to a generative AI model that is not one of the foundation models that you see that you can access online, but some other thing that's built elsewhere and is used for all sorts of stuff. And there's just no, you know, it's just a situation where this might help in some ways, but maybe not everything.
Any other questions? So my last question for you is, I mean, you kind of said you can't, right now you can't use these tools to trace a piece of content, you know, to determine whether it was made with AI or not.
Yeah.
You know, what happens in the deepfake era? You know,
Right.
what happens, or we're in the deepfake era. So
Right.
what happens, you know, if I'm Disney or Paramount, let's not use Disney because my Disney friend's here. Let's use Paramount, because no, actually Paramount's here today too. I am unnamed gigantic media company, and you know, and someone remixes a piece of my content, and
Yeah.
someone harms themselves because of that piece of my content, or someone, initiates, I don't know, a warlike action because of that piece of my content. The question I have for you is, do you think our legislators are kind of prepared for this new era of kind of blended, blurred truth and blurred content? Like, are there actual, are some of our Congress people, are some of the regulators that you talk to, are they skilled on this? Or is this kind of like when Congress asked Mark Zuckerberg, like, where the internet is?
Yeah. Right, yeah. Well, I mean, I think that everybody's looking for a quick fix. And so I think some of the, even if you look at this, I don't really want to talk about a specific policy or law, but I think the motivation among legislators or policymakers is that they want to clean up this ecosystem, and they don't want to have deep fakes, and they want people to be able to trust, and they see some sort of thing that is sold to them as a solution. And even if their staffers are very educated and very in the weeds, they only have a certain matter of time themselves to look into this stuff. So I think there's always going to be this goal of legislating for something to be used, and then it doesn't quite work. And one of the things that I really think is important that I wanted to draw attention to in the talk was that these are not detecting AI, right? And they're not necessarily detecting whether or not a piece of content was used to train the AI model that then spit out that content that you're looking at. And so what we can actually expect to see is that an AI detector or watermark or all of those things would be connected to a content provenance system potentially, where they're all they're all kind of trying to help, right? They're all solving for slightly different things and working together. And so there's tons of questions there about the downstream data use and the interoperability questions and all that. But that's what we're going to start seeing, is that an AI detector is going to be part of this process.
So that's a perfect place to end this, because what are we about at CIMM? We're about collaboration. We're about working together to solve problems. And so, Kate, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Can we everyone give her a round of applause?
Thank you.
And now we are going to come down from kind of that 10,000-foot level in terms of sort of how tools are going to be used from a content perspective in the future, to talk about how AI is being used to transform measurement and attribution now. And so I'm excited to bring up Evan Cohen, my colleague.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Please join us on stage, our panelists. Hi. Nice to see you. So we're going to try a slightly new format. We are going to speak a little bit as a panel, so your kind of standard Conference 101 experience. But then soon after, we're going to actually turn some of the discussion over to us all, or to you all. In other words, stay at the tables you're at. We're going to have some group discussions among each of your individual tables. But let's first kind of warm up the topic, if you will, by starting with our panel. So our topic is AI. Of course, incredibly important and transformative. We want to talk about how AI is affecting and or will affect video ad effectiveness and attribution. That's sort of the broad guardrails we want to speak to today. So I'm delighted to welcome Erin, Gary, and Michael to the panel. And I'm going to first ask each of you, please, to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about what your company does. You go first, please.
Test. So Curve Interactive is our company. What we do is we're an AI platform for analyzing both ads and content. Ads we make shoppable and interactive. Content we analyze for contextual relevance, brand safety, and shoppability. And we make shoppable shows along with correlating the fingerprint of ads to placement. So a lot of AI going on in our world.
I'm Michael Vinson. I'm the Chief Research Officer at ComScore, and we measure media and and AI. So on the AI topic, I like to distinguish between sort of traditional or classical AI and then this newfangled generative AI. And we do a lot in the first and are just stretching our legs into the second.
And Erin Foxworthy. I'm at Snowflake. Snowflake is a cloud-based data platform whose goal is to mobilize the world's data. Specifically, I run the go-to-market industry team, so I work with the buy side. So my job is to talk to marketers and agencies about how to democratize their data by leveraging a cloud-based platform. For AI, it's really interesting for Snowflake because as a foundational data platform, we have AI tools that actually help you write SQL better, right, and to leverage our product better. We've integrated that at our platform, but we also are a foundation to actually build and train your own models. And so we work with multiple model providers. So we actually see the usage of Cortex, which is our serverless platform, to build things like applications.
Terrific, thanks. And I should say, since I have a moment to speak to CIMM, it is a topic, AI is a topic that we're starting to think a lot about. In fact, we just published a report a couple of days ago called Opportunities for Artificial Intelligence in Media Measurement. So it's our first formal foray into this topic. Tom Weiss authored the report from us. So you can find that study on our website just as of a couple of days ago. So it's really interesting context for this discussion. So let's dig into the topic a bit. We'd love to hear a bit from each of you about how you see AI affecting advertising effectiveness. You each have really interesting and unique perspectives given where your companies are in the ecosystem and what you're trying to do. So please share with us some thoughts about ad effectiveness. Maybe that touches on new video formats, new advertising formats, which I know Curb, for example, is really leaning into. And tell us how you think AI will improve, affect, undermine the effectiveness of the video ad system. Let's start with you again.
So I think there's really the core values of AI towards ads is creative, planning, and attribution, or post-analysis and optimization. So as we look at the data out there in the world right now, it's enormous, right? Big data doesn't even describe how much data is available. We've been hearing all day about the different variables of unique identifiers like Roku and Vizio and the deal IDs at Trade Desk and all the different variables of things that are out there. How do you manage it? A data scientist is way, way too slow to make a value to it. So it seems to me, and we've been looking at this, that the analysis of all the big data for media placement, optimization, and attribution are the critical values in that how can you do that manually? It would take a team of humans to do what the AI could do in literally minutes. So I think that's one of the big things. On our side, we also do transactional stuff. So all the ads are transactional. So you can now have conversion data and use that as a part of the AI analysis for the placement and optimization, et cetera.
So AI helping create new kinds of ad formats that are more easily trackable than ever before.
And dynamic.
Indeed. ComScore has an interesting view on ad
yeah,
effectiveness,
so
I'm sure.
Yeah, and maybe a slightly contrarian view in my case. So on the specifics of attribution measurement, so at the end, which is I want to understand, having run this media plan, what was the effect of it. The AI, analyzing a bunch of data can potentially tease out signals that are hard for maybe a human analyst to find. But at the end of the day, this is sort of like MMM, and MMM is ultimately limited by exogenous variables. And no amount of, well, maybe some amount of data, but no practical amount of data is going to capture all the exogenous variables that can likely impact the effectiveness of a campaign. And that's just fact. And then I think people have this idea, some people have this idea that the AI, it's sort of this magic box, you throw data into it and out come insights. And I'm skeptical of that. I think at the end of the day, human analysts who understand what they're doing can often tease out, understand where to look for relationships that can be a priori difficult for something like AI to do. But maybe I'm old-fashioned there. And then the last thing I'll say is to really connect an outcome to exposure to a media plan, you need the information. AI can't invent something that isn't there. And I think that's an important limitation that we need to be aware of, that you don't get something for nothing. And so you do need some kind of measurement, some way to connect, either it's through identity resolution that we talked about earlier today, or it's a panel, or it's something that allows you to connect exposure to stimulus to response, and then maybe use that as a training set for something. But you don't get something for nothing, even with AI.
I'm guessing you're a skeptic on synthetic panels, which is one of the buzzwords in AI. AI using big data to impute and assume the behavior of a faux panel, a synthetic panel. I'm not sure I got that right, but
Well, so I think there are valid applications for that kind of thing. But yes, I think there's a lot of sort of wishful thinking around that.
thank you, Aaron.
I think from a Snowflake perspective, it's a different type of conversation, but I'll echo it. There's a loss of massive volume of data. You have to be in a platform that can scale, right, and handle that vast amount of data, right? So choosing your cloud platform that can do that is really important. I would say the other piece when we're talking to the buy side, it's about control, right? It's about protecting the data you have, having access to it, so you can apply this AI use cases to that, or that you're bringing a service from a provider, like a Comscore or from our identity providers, but you're running that service in your controlled environment because you as the brand and the agency, this is your customer data. And so really, I think Snowflake's changing the paradigm on the question of where and how that data is housed and secured, and then the industry comes to it. And a lot of that is AI applications. So for example, we have a few agencies that are taking in Trade Desk red logs. And on top of it, they have natural language running on top of those logs, asking a question of where did my ads run? What's the conversion data? Right? Any question they want instantaneously on top. Now that would have taken a data engineer, a few data scientists, a few weeks, right? Pull in the data, parse the data, make those questions. Right now we're talking about it instantaneously, right, in a platform like Snowflake. So the question is, do you have that data, right? Which is what where all the industry is talking about. But I get excited coming from the buy side of kind of the control and potentially, right, that this allows agencies and marketers.
Interesting. Michael had mentioned media mix models, MMMs, and kind of close cousin multi-touch attribution models. Aaron, maybe we can start with you. Interested to, and it builds off what you just said. Do you think there's potential for AI to really turbocharge MMMs? It really does build directly on what you just said, but indeed, advertisers now work with what we might call old-fashioned models one day soon to figure out which channels to allocate their media by. How do you think AI will impact that?
Again, I'm going to look at it from a foundation. MMM is an art. I love watching people argue about the models that live within MMM and the data that provides it. What I love about Snowflake, and I'm watching, again, if you really advanced marketers think about this, is they're running Meridian next to Robin, next to their own, next to another provider, with a UI on top. So we have a Streamlit, which is basically as a business UI in Snowflake. So I can take a customer or marketer's data set, run that up against data I've bought from the marketplace, or I'm pulling in from that, marketers, and then run those models against each other and look at the efficacy of the different models against each other. So again, we're setting up a platform of choose your open source, right? Choose best of breed, but run that in an environment that you control, and then you can output that and make those decisions. And so we do see a lot of LLM use cases in that already.
Interesting.
And I'd say for me, I'd just say, I think the story is yet to be written. And I think what degree of it is AI versus human interaction, I think remains to be seen. But I do agree a lot of it comes down to how do we handle, logistically, this huge amount of data and then data rights and all the things that go along with it, for sure.
If I could throw something in, I think you said the key line, in my opinion, which is natural language, right? And so communicating with the AI through natural language to ask what you would ask your data scientist and get it in milliseconds is really, I think, the answer to a lot of these issues and questions. So I hate to dispute you, but I think the world's going there. Jump on board.
So I agree the world's going there, willy-nilly, and yeah, we'll see.
But I think, again, it's scoring the accuracy. Because we get to see the models because they're running in Snowflake. And I think that's the difference. It's that you can look at the different models, choose them. They're going to learn and train and get better over time. So I think being transparent around the accuracy of the model and being an environment where you can understand that. It's also, I'm speaking from a Snowflake perspective, obviously, handing all of your marketing data to a platform that is also you're buying ads from and also has products that measure it. And now you want to provide that data to train their model, it's a very interesting proposition now. And I think that the market needs to step back and think about that a little bit, in my opinion. It's where is the neutral environment to protect the data that you don't, right? No matter what kind of contractual provisions that have been given. It's an important topic that I think a lot of people needed to talk about more.
Yeah, if you look at the Viant's new release of their AI platform, the Trade Desk's release, we're going to see more and more of that. So your point's well taken. Where's your data safe? Where is it yours?
Yeah, I've heard a couple concerns about data integrity, as Aaron was talking about. Michael, you used the word skepticism or cynicism in your very first response, getting at the inability to mimic human ingenuity and creativity. That was sort of part of your point. So my question is risks. Let's come at this from explicitly. What are some of the downsides or risks do you all think as the industry tries to experiment more aggressively with AI models to drive ad effectiveness and measurement? Any others from what we've just talked about?
Employment.
So all those data analysts out there, are they at risk? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Point?
I mean, but I think you're going to, obviously you need people to manage the models, people to manage the AI systems. So I think it takes far less people for AI to manage delivery of questions you have of your data and your media and your optimization than it would if it was humans.
Your product, as I understand it, uses AI to generate ad content. So maybe there's a bunch of creatives out there who are at risk.
We do that, and the creatives are dynamic based on parameters. So we could push it based on geo or other variables, and it's a VAST tag, and it populates pre-VAST delivery. So there's a ton of AI value that you can do in it, things that we haven't all thought of yet. So I think keeping an open mind and looking at the potential is really where we like to look.
That makes sense.
And I agree, keeping an open mind and looking for the potential. I think we also need to, another risk though is sort of the uncritical use of the output of an AI engine. And I can only imagine that, and obviously you're doing it carefully, but does it sometimes happen that something slips through that you wouldn't have wanted in an ad copy just because you're doing it at scale?
Well, no, because there are parameters set, there are details set. You give it configurations. So there's rules and guidelines around what it should do, and you tell it. The good news is it doesn't do what you don't tell it to do.
Well, AI is famous for hallucinations.
Well, it's funny how you have to manage it, but in essence, the rule you give it, if you say do this, it does it.
I'll take it from again, platform perspective. I think there's also, we can't forget these as human data, especially when we're talking about customer data. So I think especially we see this a lot in regulated industries. Do you have the right to even use the data? Are you training on sensitive data? Right? So I think spending a lot of time in understanding that data set and can that be used before you even start to train for any of these purposes, you need a platform that can parse that data and understand in this state you can use this, right? This is a 13-year-old. We have a couple of compliance issues. This is a sensitive data set within financial services, right? That's really important before we start running out and training models, that we're also thinking about the security of the data set that's feeding into the AI.
Yeah, interesting. This morning, Daniel, who was on stage, mentioned, we made a couple of references to Bebo, where he and I worked together in 2005, 2006. This was an early social network, and I bring it up just to say you never can tell the future, right, with a new technology paradigm. So we're very much in the speculation phase. Back then, we thought it was all about self-expression and sharing photos. You couldn't really imagine mobile social networks or the erosion of democracy or all the other implications that we might be seeing, all sorts of intense, crazy societal things. So who knows what this panel will be talking about in 8 years or 10 years as it relates to AI, for sure. One last question, I'm just trying to go back to trying to speculate. We just talked about some risks. Let's talk about some upsides. Is there a way to potentially re-envision media measurement using AI, given personal data capture devices? So passive metering. We now, so many of us, or all of us, have phones. Many have smartwatches. Meta just came out with like the best ever smart glasses, Orion prototype. There was a humane AI pin device that was in the news last year. That was kind of something that was you put in your shirts. There's a company called Rabbit, which has a little credit card-like data capture device. The point is, with AI, all of us can be walking around with these data capture devices. AI can parse and collect and do something with it. So could it lend itself to media measurement, this magical, passive, always-on collection of measurement? That's one vision. Curious if you guys, how you might react to that, or other kind of big picture, best case scenarios where AI could really improve measurement and adaptation.
Sure. I mean, the data that's available to it allows it to define what you ask it, right? So if there are 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 data points that it needs to identify. The AI has the capability of doing that efficiently. And it's really about what the models are you're asking it and the answers you're looking for. So I think that when you think about ChatGPT as the lowest hanging fruit example, and you say, write me a letter to a shareholder of blah, 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 and it spits out this beautiful grammar correct letter, right? That's a low-hanging fruit example. If you take that up 100 notches to data and management and optimization for media, I think it's similar.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of patterns and sort of statistical correlations within data sets that are challenging to uncover with traditional mathematical tools. And we've already been doing some of this in sort of what I was referring to as traditional AI, but maybe the sort of, maybe not literally large language models, but the sort of transformer architecture with multiple layers of neural networks, maybe that will prove to uncover things that we can't even imagine today.
I think it's brought up on the identity panel. I think the struggle is access. Right? You can't measure what you can't access. Right? And I think sitting in the video world, that's been wonderful. I think especially looking at linear and CTV, we have been able to bring a lot of data. We've been a little more open as an ecosystem. That's just a very small piece, right, of what a lot of marketers and agencies are measuring. And a lot of that data we don't have access to. And so I believe in the models, right? I know we have a technology platform that can handle billions and billions of rows in real time, right? And that's only going to get stronger. I think the question is will we have access, right? And that's a big question for the industry.
Interesting. Terrific. Well, yeah, we've only had 15 minutes, but we've skated through some really interesting issues of touching on the optimistic and pessimistic sides of the spectrum. As I warned you before, we now want to turn it over to the audience. We want to take 15 minutes and ask each of the table groups to have a discussion about some of the issues we've raised. We have some discussion prompts. Can we go to the next slide? That's me. Right here. I was sitting. Yes, reminder, don't tweet about what your neighbor tells you, but please be very open and tell everyone your secrets. That was a joke. Have an open dialogue and please respect everyone's privacy. Okay, here's a few thought starters for each of the tables to discuss. How has AI impacted measurement at your organization to date, if at all? Are there any case studies or learnings to share? I'm sure your colleagues will be really interested to see how your organizations are already putting your toes in the water, if at all. As AI evolves, are all of the existing core metrics needed given the generative nature of AI, the immediacy of data analysis, and the ability to cross-reference numerous data sets? And will old standards still apply, or can AI enable a new set of industry-defining media consumption metrics? Excuse me. So a little bit of a prod towards thinking about how a truly new state of measurement might evolve. So we're going to take 15 minutes. For folks, if you're in a table up front with just one or two people, combine. If you're standing in the back, please take your pick and join a table. At the end of the 15 minutes, I think we'll have 5 minutes or so left. I'm going to ask 1 or 2 or 3 tables to share using the cubes. So I'll ask for volunteers in about 15 minutes. So go ahead and please discuss with your table mates. Thank you.
I missed the entire discussion.
Hi, Christy. Data company. Okay.
Third-party data.
Okay. What?
Automotive.
Oh yeah, of course. Okay.
Of course.
Very familiar. It's we're a startup in the data.
Okay.
Spectrum reach. What division are you in? Oh, you are? Okay. Who wants to start?
Well, not directly from a measurement perspective. More in we use AI in our marketing, which is where I sit now. And I do believe there is some. It is not there is no how we personify data from our data. And so that is. measurement data.
But that's what she was talking about. That's different than having creative.
So there's a like Michael said, sorry,
Like for identity resolution?
yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, and I mean, it only goes so far because, like they were talking about this morning, there are a lot of gaps. But yeah, so I mean, we are using it. I think that it's going to be valuable from like especially from an identity resolution perspective, and especially I would like to see it on the end. So right now you have where I sit, either we're analyzing data or we are getting into agencies to analyze themselves, or teaching them how to analyze themselves. And there are a lot of things throughout, different products, whether that's auto or whether that's retail or whether that's farming. There are a lot of things that are very similar. And I think that there's really low-hanging fruit in being able to do that. Look at that data, a large data set with all these different methods, and like take that into something that's meaningful.
That's exactly where we're trying to get to. We're not there yet. We've yes. But one of the things that it's like we give a lot of just here's a raw data set. It makes sense. We would love what sales team would love to be able to give clients. Give me your use case and let's summarize the top 5 outcomes or the insights that you should take away from this instead of you having to dig through it hours to make sense or put it into a PowerPoint that you can then go it's the summarization side of it and making meaning. Like I when like the CIMM report comes out, I upload it into it, I have it summarized exactly the whole thing.
Of course.
And we do the same thing with our measurement data sets, so that people who don't have a lot of time can still get the value from it.
I think from like a measurement standpoint, like daily data, right, coming in. What I've seen is a lot of the agency, like holding companies that I work with, buy side, they don't have enough manpower to actually data to day. It's like daily updated. Right. And so at the end of the day, like if there was an AI system that was like understood your KPI, what you were trying to do, and what you're trying to achieve after week 1 of a campaign, saying, hey, this market or this particular creative or whatever that is. Yeah.
No, but we
Okay, yeah.
we actually, our firewall blocks all AI blocked because, I think ISPs, there are only 2 of them, and then it's also highly regulated. And then before the firewall was there, I use AI to write my code so that I can complete it. At the time, it wasn't terribly accurate, but it's what the skeleton does, and I could add on to it. But I think we're working towards exactly what you described, on AI, understand what, like it's basically you're like, you have data, and then you're like, okay, in your day, like how can we like X1, X2, X3, 5, how do you like that why it's something, and then AI would tell us, I think it's going to be that, it's the same.
Right.
Like how to allocate everything. If the client wants to X, and then like how do you allocate but the company that's basically but they like train the machine so that it is so that when you do like let's say you take conversion customer, it needs a lot AI faster, yeah, that's right. A data scientist, you have to pay at least 200K. However, you don't have to pay that. Even also, you do have to pay money for like so that's going to be a limiting factor because that's really bad stuff. Because like us, we have data on like each individual viewing or even each individual click of a remote control, and it can get like it's like literally a road. So AI doing it, it's like very very expensive. So that's a balancing
I think it's interesting you brought up like programming, using it for simplistic code, because I know some programmers that I work with that use it as well. We have like code of conduct, but we still use it, and I didn't think it would be that effective. And they use it really effectively. They're very fast, and like so from a new solution building and enhancement standpoint, I don't know that it's necessarily job descriptions. You still need people, but you can get a lot more stuff out the door a lot faster. We need to enhance this to have a new thing that a client is looking for as a market shift or whatever. Right, and that's and so I think
Well, but it also gets wrong.
right. Like it means that a lot of
Presumably their time is freed up to do higher value tasks.
right, high value tasks, learn how to interface with the AI.
Maybe there's fewer of that. How about you?
Think about it, like the hardest thing in the world. I mean, and I haven't seen it. What was that, John? So, are they doing that? I should talk to them. They are. I just talked to them.
oh my god. Yeah.
Are they resizing tags?
It's not that one, but I'm sure
It's not helpful to us, but it doesn't have CSV files.
That's like
oh, that's so.
Like this is just easy. It's very simple, very easy job for us. Figure out like all of them. Yeah, that's like that's how we're using it.
this one we're getting
I know, but I
Everyone's asking us to have multiple data. I think you come in and look at all of our highlights. It's like we need a whole I mean, the data there. I don't even know who we own the data.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and in hallucinates things, me and a product manager fought with ChatGPT a couple of weeks ago about how many R's were in the word strawberry for about 45 minutes before I got to admit that there were 3. And like, not a very good use of work time, whatever.
I think
But
I saw someone. I think I saw something on Twitter. About
yeah, we saw it somewhere and we're like, okay, this can't be real.
Yeah.
It is real, and you can convince it that to get the right answer. It took about 45 minutes.
like going back and forth.
Back and forth, arguing with this AI.
Like I was like, okay, this part is wrong, and it's like, okay, let me try again. And I'm like, okay, it's wrong because of XYZ, and then it would be okay, let me try again.
Yeah, the example we got all the time is Tiffany and Austin is the jewelry maker versus the pop star. And so searching
1 minute warning. Thanks.
We had that issue with Altria.
It's all going to go back to trade. It's going to go back to trade.
Not getting on like what Aries and Cancer, whatever astrology, because Cancer, and that was part of their blacklist, of course, as a tobacco company. So they They had to really refine some of those.
Everyone except people born in June.
Right, exactly. That's our audience.
I think it's interesting. Yeah, exactly. Like, man, there's a big spike in cigarette usage except for among this one group.
I think AI has been used a lot. My understanding, like programmatic, like DSPs, like the traders. They've been doing this for. But I do think it's going to be we are trying to take those data sets and really provide
Yes.
It's still, you put your building blocks in.
Right.
All right, everyone. Thank you.
When there's like PMAX.
Thanks. Let's wrap up. I only gave you 12 minutes. I said I was going to give you 15 because Tamika told me I had to. All right. Thanks. Let's get back into one conversation. We are going to just take a couple minutes for sharing. Is there one or two tables? Let's start with one table. Is there a table that'd like to share a couple of observations of their discussion, and you get to touch the blue cube as an incentive?
That's inappropriate.
Who had a rich discussion about AI usage today? Or, there we go. Kevin's table. Oh, good throw. Fantastic.
More worried about the Cubs.
Great throw.
I used to play in goal. That's scary.
We need some work on the catch.
You think?
So yeah, speak into the cube
Is
and
it
give us a
actually
minute.
working?
It works.
So I think there were a couple of things that we talked about. The first one is, what is measurement? Right? What do you mean by measurement? We spend a lot of time talking about it's what we do, and it's what some of the, I apologize, name. Thanks, Casey. Some stuff that Magnite is doing around the using AI to classify the content. So if I've got better classification of the content, I'm going to have better measurement in the measurement system, even with the same measurement tools, right? For those that care about the marketing mix modeling side, when you have some form of classification schema on the creative, especially if it's an ordinal value, suddenly I have a way of measuring lots of different creative against the same scale. And that means my models can pick up when the creative is different, and you can do better performance measurement from that space. But we spent a lot of time talking about how AI can be used to build better classification systems. So classification at scale, like the stuff that we've talked about that we're doing at XR, which is we do a classification across about 1 million assets a year that just lets us say, hey, this has these values. Therefore, when you put those values into a measurement model or in DCO into an optimization model, now you can actually use the AI classification. So we talk more about that than AI Gen.
Makes sense. Actually, that's a key conclusion in our CIMM AI report, which I talked about, which is metadata creation and AI's role there. Another table, please. We'd love to hear some other thoughts on what you talked about. I see volunteers. Thank you.
Yeah, you throwing it.
I'm going to give you.
Ooh, well done.
I raised my hand. So
You
I got to talk.
Yeah, you do.
We pondered that AI, whether it's machine learning or generative AI, is going to make we'll need less data analysts from not just the actual running of whatever model or analysis, but the whole cleansing of the data to get it ready. We also believe that generative AI is great for context setting. So we all know that analytics professionals have a really hard time telling a story, let alone building one. And we think that AI can bring together a lot of different kinds of data. So you might have a media mix model, you may have some other types of research, you may have your press hits report, and the CMO needs one coherent story to tell to the CFO and to the CEO about the whole campaign performance, and generative AI can start to pull all those things together.
Makes sense. Thank you. Measurement professionals will not be replaced, though, right? You're talking about data.
Well, no, well, just to comment on that. So when you have to have a lot of precision in the actual data itself, then no, generative AI isn't for that. But that's why they're developing these RAGs, so you can have a true set. Anyway, yeah. So measurement's safe. Analytics, watch out.
Good distinction. Good point. All right, we have time for one more. No, we don't.
No, we don't.
Tamika gave me the hook. Okay, thanks everyone. This was fun.
And everyone, let's give Evan a round of applause. Evan, as John mentioned in the morning, Evan is here to help us organize some of the chaos in terms of all of the projects that we are working on. So, and Evan and John are also doing one-on-ones with our member companies, sort of working to sort of understand the key projects that are coming down the pike. So, right? We just maybe tell them really briefly about that.
We're in 2025 research planning. So we are reaching out to a lot of CIMM members for feedback. We can't hit every single one of them. So if we're accidentally missing your organization, feel free to call us, send us an email, tell us what you want CIMM to study, research, commission, look into next year.
Thank you so much, Evan. We're going to continue with the research train. What you guys may have noticed is there was supposed to be a networking break, but there won't be because we have cocktails in an hour. So we will make it through this rapidly. But we are a research organization, and so it wouldn't be a CIMM session without someone actually presenting some additional research. And so I'm really excited to present Emily Kistner from Captify. I always think of Emily from Adstra, but she's at a new company now. And she's going to talk a little bit about how Captify helps companies use content signals and data, actually search signals, to drive tune-in. So Emily, I'll bring you up on stage. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, so how do I see what I can see here? Oh, perfect. Oh, great. I'm a measurement professional who will not be replaced. Hello, everyone. Okay, my job's safe. Nice to see everybody. Okay, so, I'm Emily Kistner. I heard Captify's pitch for the first time when I was on the buy side in 2019, and I begged them to decouple their data from programmatic media and let me put it on TV, and they did. And now 5 years later, I've just recently joined their team to lead their TV business in the US. So it was a long con, but I did it. So I'm a big fan of the data for a long time. Okay, so for background, Captify is the largest holder of on-site search data outside of, And when we say on-site search data, we're talking about that bar within a web page where a viewer is typically taking like a deeper, more specific search journey after they've left a search engine. We collect this data by partnering directly with the publishers to ingest that first-party search that's happening on their site, along with the content on the page that the search is happening on. We see about 1 billion search events a day across 3 million websites. So after we ingest these 30 billion monthly searches, we bring structure and extract value from this data set using semantic technology. So we're looking at just the meaning of the words in context and using natural language processing to identify patterns and make connections between these data sets. So we can tell if the person who is searching the words Paris Hilton is a celebrity news enthusiast or if they are planning a trip to Europe. We also take frequency, recency, and level of intent into account. So, for example, if my friend and I have both searched for the words credit card, a typical search retargeting shop would classify us both as being in market for a credit card. But are we really? After I searched credit card, I went on to search for Converse sneakers and then things to do this weekend in New York and best bars in NYC. So I'm not really that seriously looking for a credit card. But my friend has typed credit card and then gone on to search best credit card for airline miles, best credit card for travel rewards, Chase Sapphire credit card reviews. So we can see the context around her search, and we can tell that she's actually much more likely to be in market, and we classify her as such. So this, in a nutshell, is what search intelligence is. And at Captify, we use search intelligence to create audiences for targeted media buying and to do post-campaign measurement. So we look at things like uplift in amount of search, shift in sentiment around a certain subject, and someone's increase in purchase intent pre- and post-campaign. And this data is also the basis of our insights. So today should be easy listening. We've done a research project around the series Shogun, And we thought that this was an interesting case study to look at around sentiment in tune-in, because Shogun doesn't really fit the model of a typical Hollywood blockbuster. It's a foreign language series. It's based on a book that came out 50 years ago. It's got a relatively unknown cast in the US, anyhow. And it aired on a smaller cable network. Shogun seemed to kind of go viral as it was airing. They saw this big increase in viewership the week before the finale, 48% increase in viewership from the second to last episode to the last episode. And of course, we're probably all familiar. It swept at the Emmys, being the first non-English language show to win for Best Drama and the first Japanese actors ever to win Emmys. So oftentimes in tune-in marketing, we are pretty limited in strategy. You have a really limited time frame to market, just like a few days between episodes, and any advanced targeting is typically done on viewers that watched the first couple of episodes, or maybe they watched the series last year. And thinking back to before a show even premieres, it's just difficult to tell what's going to resonate with people proactively, what their sentiment is going to be around a certain thing. And then once the show premieres, you get a pretty singular metric, like minutes streamed or tickets sold if you're a studio. So it's difficult to tell if something was a really big hit, why did it work, what was resonating, or if it was a flop, why. So the thesis here is, can we start to use search intelligence to shift from the question, did it work, to what worked? So let's get into the insights. This is what we captured in the Captify search network around the topic of Shogun. 25.8 million total searches for Shogun between January and September of 2024. About 1.9 million unique users searching around this topic, and that amounts to about 1 in 3 Shogun viewers. So, probably not surprisingly, we found that during episode release weeks, the largest volume of search around this topic happened in the first 3 days after each episode premiered, and then it really drops off. So a good insight for this series at the time could have been to spend a majority of your tune-in budget on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, leading up to the next episode premiere to get the greatest impact for those dollars. And this trend was pretty consistent throughout the 10-week run of the show, with the exception of the week leading up to the finale, which we know now the finale saw this huge spike in viewership from the second to last week to the last week. And if you look at the volume of search data, we probably could have predicted that. So this circled green here in the bottom right, the night before, or the day before, the finale aired, actually saw the highest volume of search activity around the show of the entire run. And this was probably due to people binge watching, to social buzz that was happening around the show at the time, and then critic reviews that were being published between each episode. You can see our top keywords searched were around viewership, so like Shogun where to watch or how to watch Shogun online. So that was resonating with viewers at the time. The week-over-week trend also supports the same narrative. You can see there was 3-week straight growth in search volume, culminating in 62% greater volume of search around the finale than the premiere. So shifting to sentiment now. As the show was making its introduction to viewers for the first time, the highest search activity was happening around topics like the trailer and critic reviews and where to watch. But after the show is done airing, we see this shift in behavior. And there's greater search volume around things like the cast, episode recaps, and fan discussion pages. And in fact, the volume around the post-airing topics was greater than when the show was actually on the air. So a traditional tune-in campaign would have missed this opportunity to increase viewership, like the buzz was happening after the fact almost. It took 2 months for this topic to reach its highest volume of engagement around these fan discussion pages. Another thing we can take away from this data is that there's a need to differentiate your audience strategy from tune-in marketing to on-demand marketing. You can change the messaging in your creative or your audience targeting strategy to market differently to what's resonating with viewers at the time, pre and post airing. This is another great example of a topic that was resonating with viewers during the show run, but not in the months following. So we saw a really big spike in sentiment around the show between episodes 6 and 8 that was largely tied to critic reviews, like the ones you can see here from Tom's guide. So we analyzed sentiment at Captify by looking at the language in the query around the search, so similar to how like social listening works. And we categorize words that are often used to convey positive and negative emotion. And then we calculate this net searcher sentiment score based on the ratio of positive to negative language used around a certain topic. So you can see here the show premieres at a 3.5 net searcher sentiment score, then takes this dip down, and then has this huge big spike up at episode 7 to 13.5. But looking back on the left to that pre-post airing data, the importance of critic reviews about cuts in half from the time the show's airing to the months following. So this was a timely topic for this show. So here's a week-over-week view of just how the series maintained really high engagement with viewers for months after the finale. You can see on this trend line, it starts in April, so right after the finale has premiered, and we see a pretty high level of engagement continuing around some events that happened in May and June. So season 2 and 3 were announced in May, and all of the for-your consideration events were happening around late May and early June. So there was a lot of engagement, I think, around the press that was happening at that time. Then, of course, we see another big spike around the Emmys and the weeks following in September. Not surprising. The top keywords at the bottom here show that topics around the book and the true story of Shogun were resonating the most. So people were looking up things like Shogun, facts behind the fiction, where does the Shogun book start off, and the true story of Shogun's final battle. Okay, so final section, profiles. We analyzed the profile differences of people that were watching the show in real time, so as it was airing week to week, versus the people that joined that on-demand wave in the months following. We classify these profiles based on observed behavior within our search network over time among users actively searching. And we found probably what you would expect to see. There are some overlaps in basic interests, but the profiles of the two viewers are different. So the real-time viewers over-indexed as thrill seekers, surprisingly. So this is people that are searching around like adventure, travel, and extreme sports, things like that, like hang gliding and glacier climbing. And they're also fitness fanatics, so people searching around healthy recipes and fitness classes and things like that. Their top life moments skew a little bit older, so they're looking at retirement planning or financing a home. Then the on-demand fans way highly over-indexed as online storytellers. So that's people that are searching around topics of starting and maintaining a blog and content creation. And their top life moments skewed a little bit younger, so searching around things to do with being a new parent or being interested in going to grad school. So this is probably not an earth-shattering concept, but I think what we can take away from this is, again, the differentiated audience targeting you can have to promote on-demand content versus promoting gaining viewership in the moment. The interests of the two groups are different, and different things will resonate with them. So for our studio and tune-in clients, we create these fandom audiences, we call them, by looking at connected interests among searchers in our database. So this way we're able to go deeper than a typical tune-in audience of like watched episodes 1 through 3 or movie ticket purchasers. I know that's a often used target for the studios. So we like to talk about intuitive and unintuitive connections. So for this Shogun fandom, there are some intuitive connections, things you would expect to see, like gaming and interest in books and fantasy and like role-playing games, things like that. But there's also some unintuitive connections. So fashion and style, fitness, recipes, and outdoor activities. And if you look, the pink here is people that were searching around the topic of Shogun and these interests, and the blue is the total, basically active searchers, like your total market for this fandom. So a traditional tune-in strategy would have only captured 9% of this connected audience. So there's big upside to be had by looking at connected interests and kind of expanding your audience strategy that way, versus, it's kind of like lookalike modeling, but it's deterministic lookalike modeling. Okay, so here's a couple success stories from these fandom audiences. We see great results when we run these for clients. Here are a few from this year. We saw 18% increase in tune-in for a sports league live events, 3x search uplift for a film premiere that happened on a subscription service, and 37% more efficient CPA for subscriber acquisitions on a streaming platform. Oh, I have 3 seconds left. Okay, so if you like this kind of content, we publish insights like this all the time on the Captify website. We look across all categories, not just tune-in, and they do a lot of pieces around relevant cultural moments like the Olympics, or we had an election war room going during election season. So you can check out our trends page for more. Thank you.
Emily, one would assume that you hadn't just started this role, so thank you. You were quite knowledgeable. What I love about this presentation and why we invited her to do it was also because this is we've been talking about content measurement all day. They're measuring content, right? And this is an alternative way to understand how and what people are kind of communicating from a content perspective. So I know Kellyanne from Canada, the CMA, probably wants to chat with you, Emily, just as an FYI. But I personally want to chat with Alex Angeledes from Google. So Alex, can you come join us? Yeah. I think maybe you take that one.
Do you want me to go here?
Oh, no, we can sit close.
We don't need to distance.
We can sit close. It's fine. Alex,
nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Nice to see everybody.
Thank you for joining us. I
came 2 floors down, so
Yeah,
thank you
thank
you for doing it here.
It's the whole, and then you were upstairs actually because we were upstairs earlier, right?
Okay, yeah. Then 1 floor.
So let's dive in. Alex, you spent most of your career in ad sales.
My whole career, pretty much.
Right. And video.
Except for maybe a year in media buying to get me started.
Just so that you understood the other side, right? But video ad sales specifically, I mean, you were at we just talked about this. You were at MTV, which was the way that people consumed content for such a long time, right? To the early YouTube era with Vice, and you worked at an MCN, which for those of you who don't know is a multi-channel network, and now you're in the streaming era. So what's changed about the media sales process in this time?
Well, everything and some things haven't changed. So I guess I'll answer it 2 ways. So yeah, I was very fortunate. Obviously, this ages me, but it was the early 90s at MTV. And for those of you who are as old as me, remember that was the early days of cable. And cable was much, much smaller than broadcast. Broadcast was the 4 networks. I mean, this is really, I'm going to take you way back. Broadcast was the 4 networks. Cable was kind of the upstart. Nobody ever thought cable could ever surpass broadcast, right? If we think about the way things have changed, I think that was one early part of my career that I was able to see in that first iteration was this growth of cable, and I was fortunate to represent MTV and the MTV networks, which also included Nickelodeon, these 2 powerhouses. But if you just kind of focus on MTV for a minute, you think about the role that it played in the zeitgeist for young generations of young people, year after year after year, it was incredible. And lo and behold, several years later, when you look at the upfront marketplace, all of a sudden cable was surpassing broadcast and upfront revenue. That kind of freaked everybody out. And I was really, really fortunate to be on that rocket ship for many, many years. I did actually have a little bit of a stop about 7 years in at MTV where I went over to Yahoo in January of 2000. And if everybody remembers my timing in January of 2000, it was looking great. I looked at the stock looked great. I was hitting refresh on my stock options. And then 6 months later, the bubble burst. But it was a really interesting, kind of foray for me to kind of understand what at least the early days of the internet was really all about, what it might be. But I did end up going back to MTV for another 10 years. So, I found never burn a bridge is a really important thing that I tell lots of students when I speak at universities, because I was fortunate to go back and be a part of MTV for the next 10 years. But what was happening, in those in those 10 years was especially later on, was there were companies like Google and Facebook and others that were really starting to become incredibly powerful. And obviously, Google's purchase of YouTube was an incredible M&A story, probably one of the best M&A stories in business, if you think about it. And I started to see that kind of happening, and but still sitting on top, right? Still sitting at MTV. MTV was still mattered to young people, but maybe less and less, and maybe the powers that be at Viacom at the time and MTV didn't really quite see what was happening. It was pretty fascinating. My last year at MTV was in 2010, and I like to tell this story if this is okay. I was at a exec summit that our then CEO, Judy McGrath, threw for all of our executives, and she had 2 guest speakers at this summit. This is 2010. One was Reed Hastings, right? And you go, Reed Hastings, wow, Netflix. The other was a executive in charge of media buying at a major studio who was a major buyer of MTV Network's ads. Who do you think got the most attention in that room? It was not Reed Hastings. And I remember that very, very clearly, certainly a few years later, as you started to see what Netflix was becoming, right, as an SVOD service. And he was describing it, and people were like, "Oh yeah, ho hum. Let's talk to this person over here who's got all the money for us." And she told us TV is everything to us. Well, that obviously was the beginning of the change of a lot of how we think about media and how we think about the landscape. And I saw the writing on the wall. I was unfortunately part of one of the many kind of executive layoffs that happened at that company. And I guess in hindsight, fortunate that I was, because it forced me to really think about this world of premium digital video that was really taking hold and really taking off and becoming really, really important to not just younger generations, but generations of people. And I had to change my personal brand. I had to move off from just being, what I thought was the preeminent, kind of TV ad seller and ad sales leader, and move on to premium digital video. And I found myself at Vice for a very short period of time. And I'm sure we all know the story of Vice. It is an auspicious one. And I certainly learned the power of personal branding in that one, because I think maybe the greatest salesman I've ever met is Shane Smith. If you've ever met him or ever heard him speak, he's incredibly engaging. He can make you believe anything, and he had everybody believing Vice was the next big thing. And so I believed it and jumped into it, but learned very quickly, while Vice was challenged, what was happening was the kind of the big move of YouTube and Google to invest what was about $100 million, very publicly come out and say, we're going to invest $100 million in premium content on YouTube to try to dispel the notion that it's just cat videos. And so they went out to professional content creators, including Vice. And that's where I started to really see the power of that platform. Unfortunately, in those early days, there were no partner selling arrangements. You just got your production money. And I was trying to run sales for Vice, and I thought I was going to be able to sell these channels on YouTube, and I could not. But so I thought to myself, somehow I got to get there where I can sell YouTube channels. And then I discovered, the influencer. Then I discovered the digital influencer, or what you call creator economy 1.0, which was this MCN space that you referenced, the multi-channel network. And I remember I got a call from a company called The Collective that was starting a MCN called Collective Digital Studio, and they were a traditional talent management company that had started to manage some of the bigger YouTube stars. And I started to look at the numbers, and I started to look at the scale. I looked at their subscriber numbers, I looked at their views, and they were doing tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of views. They had some of the top creators at the time. And for me, that was really, really exciting. If I was going to kind of leapfrog from corporate America and get into something that was a little bit more entrepreneurial, it felt like the thing to do. And it also got me closer and closer to YouTube. And then, I spent some time helping build that business and hopefully, preparing myself for a future at Google. I spent a lot of time. I think I had 8 salespeople across the country. Google had 3,000. So I spent a lot of time, co-selling in YouTube and Google and trying to get to know those folks. And I was very fortunate to be tapped to run media and entertainment 10 years ago now. So lots has changed, and I can go on and on and on about what has changed in the landscape since then. But I think you have a pretty good sense of it from my career trajectory.
And I mean, the reason I wanted to talk to you about that, right? Because part of this is to talk about tactics and what we do, but it's also about how have things changed, right? And how has the business changed? Even what you just illustrated now, you were at MTV, which was like the cream of the crop. But even then, selling cable, there was hesitation, right? Or selling cable to sort of in a market that was built on kind of traditional linear TV, you get pushback. Then you go to the Vice model and you get pushback. Now you're in the YouTube model. Do you still get pushback?
Less and less pushback, certainly. In the MCN space and in the early days of the creator economy, yeah, a little bit, right? You're still competing for eyeballs, and you're still competing with tons of other content opportunities. But when you look at the way consumers are consuming nowadays, and we're all those consumers, right? So it's not just Gen Z, it's all of us. It really is about choice. It's about community. It's about relevance. And so, in the early days, sure, there was a little bit more pushback. 10 years ago, when I was, and I run the media and entertainment industry partnerships here at Google, there was some pushback, right? Even though you could demonstrate scale, there was still a little bit of, or probably a lot of early days of reticence, and TV was still the foundation of every kind of movie studio's buy. Until you start to see, the power of the influencers, until you see the scale of the audiences, and then ultimately being able to demonstrate specific outcomes, right? If you think about, let's go back to the early 90s, and for the research people in the room, and I am not a research person, but I think we all knew that there was not really much measurement in the early 90s, right? It was just Nielsen ratings and MSA posts, and you would deliver a broad audience according to an MSA. Yes, you're laughing because it was so easy back then. Oh my God, but it was. I mean, there was no real efficacy other than delivering a post analysis at the end of a buy, where I generally, if I'm being honest, at the MTV networks told you I under-delivered. I was going to owe you ADUs, but you're going to have to give me more money anyway because it's the only way to reach young people, and you got to do it. And come on, help me out. So there was no measurement back then, or very little measurement back then. Now, obviously, we're in a very, very different world, and outcomes really matter. And platforms like the one I represent are able to deliver outcomes. And you mentioned AI earlier, that that technology and the ability to be as predictive as you can possibly be using the power of that technology has made it a completely different world when you think about your media planning and media buying.
So this is not one of the questions that we discovered, but I mean, you just said something, and admittedly, that is one of the challenges, though. I think at a lot of our events, we have sort of media buyers and agencies that say the same way that you said back at the MTV days, hey, we underdelivered and you probably got to pay us a little bit more. They do say, I think, that Google probably does that now too, right? And so I think that there's
I don't know about that.
But I think that it seems like there's always this tension between kind of the sell side saying this is our product is valuable, we reach this audience, and the buy side saying, well, I don't know, and I want somebody else to measure that, right? As opposed to you. I have two more questions for you. One is, so looking at that landscape, do you think it's possible to build a brand sort of entirely in the realm of short form video now, entirely in the realm of kind of YouTube, or do you still need big screen impact, and even if that's YouTube on the big screen?
Well, I think that's really interesting that you mentioned that. If you look at the latest Nielsen gauge and you see YouTube on the big screen garnering over 10% of all viewing of streaming, that's incredible to think about, right? I think that to me is one of the most transformational things that has happened in media, is that stat alone, that, on that, call it 60-inch experience that's in the living room, people are watching more of that YouTube app than any other option that they have, and they have myriad other options, including some of our favorite streaming services, right? So I think that changes the game completely. And it has changed the game completely, and will continue to do so. It's funny, before I came in here, I got a text about a story on the Wrap that talked about election day, for YouTube versus versus broadcast television and prime time, right? And I would suggest, and I hope it's not too pejorative, but I would say like the days of day parts is really, kind of moving aside because people are consuming content when they want it, how they want it. And it was something like over 60 million hours of viewing on YouTube on election day. So that's people, consuming it how they want it, when they want it, versus what we traditionally call prime time on the networks. And those numbers appear to be down. So you could only imagine the correlation is that there's a shift, and there's a shift in the way people are consuming. And, as we talk to brands and you talk about trying to find audiences, you have to follow those audiences and you have to follow the consumer behavior if you expect to deliver the right business outcomes.
We have a fireside chat about the creator economy right after this. And given that you kind of delved into that influencer world, how do you see creators fitting into the media plan today? Do your clients put them sort of in a media? Are they right alongside like a 15-second spot? And are they a must-have now, kind of in the same way that YouTube inventory might be a must-have?
I think so. I think it gets into the conversation about premium, right? And we have, and you've seen our Brandcast events. Where we've tried to spend a lot of time talking to Madison Avenue about the fact that, in this day and age, prime time as we knew it really is personal, right? It's not about a certain time period, but it really is about what you consume, when you want it, how you want it, the communities that build around it, around these channels. And so I think that's changed kind of everything. And so are the influencers or the creators becoming an important part? Absolutely, they're a huge part. There are some that are more well-known than others, but what I like about the platform of YouTube as an example, obviously I'm biased, but I sell it. But if you think about it, it's about aggregating really large audiences who demonstrate the affinities and intent to buy your products, right? So the entertainment industry loves our creators, and they love our creator takeovers. They love those. It feels like moments, right? And that's really important, I think, still in the media mix. But I would argue that when you can marry the scale of multiple influencers, right, who are hitting the right audiences at the right time with the right creative, we're going to deliver really, really strong business outcomes. And ultimately, that's the way I encourage our media buying community to think about, how to deliver business outcomes in this environment. It's less about I have to be in this one show, Mr. Beast or another. It's really, I think, more about the fact that you have thousands and thousands of creators who are fueling an economy that's at least on the YouTube, a $70 billion economy over the last 3 years that we've paid out to content creators in our model is an incredible story, right? And it's an incredible opportunity to reach a consumer because the consumer is so leaned into these creators. I saw it firsthand. If you've ever been to VidCon, I don't know if you've ever seen VidCon, it's incredible when you walk in there and see the way people react to their favorite creators. And I might not know them, and you might not know them, but there's a lot of people who do, and they love them, and that has a great affinity for your brand.
Alex, my last question is, given the fact that you've had this chance to kind of be at the forefront of video sales, right? And you make these leaps to kind of what's next. And you make these leaps, maybe you don't have a crystal ball and you take a risk. What do you think is coming down the pike next in terms of kind of video content consumption? Is it virtual goods? Is it 3D? No, it's not 3D. Is it AI? Is it VR? Is it AR? Like where are you seeing kind of the trends from a video kind of content consumption perspective headed?
Well, I think it's again, this sounds so self-serving because it's obviously the reason for being, as our company has stated, but I think it's AI, right? Mm-hmm. I think AI and Gen AI, AI in the creative process, AI in the predictive process is what is the game changer. It's happening right now, right? It's been happening at our company for years. It's been at the backbone, but now it's so public and it's such a big part of the conversation. But I think that's what is ultimately going to help this platform and other platforms evolve, and it's something that you need to lean into, and you really need to understand, how it can power your content creation, how it can power content proliferation, because it is now. It's not the future. It is right now, and I think that's the game changer.
Thank you so much, Alex. Can we
Thank
give him
you.
a round of applause? We are going to continue our forward-thinking and futuristic conversation. I am excited to welcome up my friend, Shira Lazar and Tim Sauve from Creator IQ to talk a little bit about how to actually measure the impact of the creator economy.
How's everyone doing? Yeah. I actually ended up Okay, although I was a theater kid, so I could speak loudly to all of you, but we'll do the mic. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I own What's Trending. I'm also a creator. We cover digital culture and the social media water cooler, What's Trending. And Tim and I have known each other for many years.
Many years,
Since
yeah.
I feel like the beginning of Creator IQ.
So just quick introduction. Tim Sauve, Chief Partnerships Officer at Creator IQ. A lot of people in this room might ask, what's Creator IQ? Think of us as the data engine for the creator economy. We work with Fortune 500 brands, big media holdcos, media entertainment companies, just to help them harness and understand the scale of the creator economy. We can talk, Alex did a great job of kind of setting up the primer of the creator economy. He talked about 1.0, 2.0. I would say that we are in a 3.0 phase right now. We're not talking about campaigns with tens of creators. For the brands in this room, for Fortune 500 brands, there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of creators talking about your brand every single year, whether you know it or not. We help you try and understand what's going on out there and harness that content and that energy.
I think that's really good to know because, again, when you talk about influencer marketing, you could think of these like smaller scale campaigns. How are you doing it in a way where you are having tens of thousands of creators join these campaigns? It's still a human-centric industry, but you've ultimately built tech and you're taking advantage of the tech to make it happen.
Yeah, so I actually brought slides. Let me see if I can
Yay.
why is this not? Oh, that's weird. That slide didn't build. So first, like kind of setting the stage, right? So we talk about the world being content first, and we talk about being creator led. We are not driving the content first approach. People in this building for YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, we are moving from a social graph to a content graph. So for any given brand, upwards of 90% of consumers that see your content don't actually follow that creator or follow your brand, right? So the algorithms around engagement, velocity, those types of things are controlling how the feeds are run and what you're seeing. So one, really important, you understand what a big macro shift is happening right now. It's all around content and insights. Second, talking a little bit about what I just mentioned. When we talk about creators and brands and your brand conversation, creators have won. So this is just some stats over the first 8 months of this year, looking at TikTok and Instagram only. Sorry, YouTube. And Fortune 500 brands, brand content versus creator content. 12x the impressions, 17x the engagements, 32x the post count. For a brand like Apple, it's 680 times post count on creators versus brand, right? So they've won. Again, how do you harness this? How do you bring this in for scale? So we do work with brands use our technology to help them understand what's happening. Just understanding the general universe of creators talking about you, and then how do you build that funnel to determine who you want to work with via organic relationships, paid relationships, how you move that content into paid ecosystems, which I think we're going to talk about. But this at least sets up kind of the scale that we're seeing today.
And it's so interesting. I mean, these are really incredible slides as a reference, how you harness the organic conversation and then control it more when you have a campaign.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I've been in this space for 14 years. I see an old friend, Sarah, over there. Measurement has lagged in this space. I think if there's skeptics in this room, it's like, but great, how do you actually measure this? How do you get beyond the tens of thousands of posts and great, we can see awareness, or we can see video views? I think that is the biggest advancement over the last couple years, honestly, and it's because of folks in this room. One, we got to the scale. I'll hopefully stop saying that word. Two, it's people in this room really helping advance this measurement. And three, it's what the social platforms where, again, 99% of this engagement is happening, what they can unlock. Look, things like TikTok, you can now see view through rate on every single organic and paid. They make it much easier to push content into paid ecosystems, whether it be YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram or others, but on platform. We're getting lower funnel measurement through click link, conversion data, et cetera. So for some, maybe this is still a little primitive for this category. At least for us, we are seeing full funnel measurement actually come to life.
That's incredible. Still, I always wonder, it's hard enough to deal with some of these people. I mean, I'm a creator too, and we get a bad rap, like, oh my God, like going back and forth. Again, how do you do that at scale to get the results you want?
Yeah, I think like anything, you have to think about it as a funnel. So Nestle, this is a public case study, so I can talk about it. But whether you're Netflix or you're Nestle or you're NBC Universal, again, tens of thousands of creators. In the case of Nestle, they work with about 65,000 creators around the world each year. That doesn't mean that they are engaging with 65,000 individual people, right? That's unrealistic. About 80+% of the conversation about your brand comes organically. It's not through a direct relationship. So think ratings and reviews, product sites, you name it. For someone like Nestle, when you've got consumer packaged goods, food and bev, people are talking about your brands, reviewing your home goods product, et cetera. But you at least need to have visibility into that. You need to consider things like brand safety. Is there anything damaging about your brand out there? But you build a funnel, right? So maybe it is 65,000 different creators talking about you. In the case of Nestle, we work with them in about 50 or 60 countries. They have hundreds of users on our platform, understanding what that conversation is. They have agency partners who are in the platform trying to understand what that conversation is. And then you do get smaller and smaller, right? That is by a brand, a region, a team will then work with hundreds of creators. It could be tens in a single campaign. Alex was just talking about a line item, right? You don't have a media line item with thousands of creators for a given campaign, but it all adds up when you're talking about these big global brands.
And I think this is interesting, the trend of owned content versus creator content. Where do you see that going? Because it's not like owned content goes away.
No, it absolutely doesn't go away. I would make the argument selfishly that the budgets on owned versus creator are still way off. When you're talking about 12 to 32x on average, I promise you right now, each one of these Fortune 100 brands are still spending more money on owned content, owned creative, owned paid than they are creators, each and every one of them. So, that's where, again, self-serving, but we see a real imbalance between the two. It's still absolutely critical. Creators don't take over the world, but they become more and more important in your marketing mix, and really understanding how they do fit into your MMMs, which is another big advancement. How you are measuring that content alongside your own is critical, and I think a big part of the kind of next phase.
Yeah, and prepping for this, we also talked about, going from the awareness to that real ROI. A lot of times people are like, okay, awareness, but we don't, a lot of people aren't seeing things. That's why creators get a bad rap, or they think they don't see things. But we were talking about the model of putting paid against it, which we don't feel like is taken advantage of as much.
Yeah, our data shows that still only about 40% of brands are putting creators into their paid campaigns. So again, an imbalance there of
we talk about paid, it's not paying the creator, it's getting the creative asset from the creator and then putting paid media against that.
Yeah, absolutely, into TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, et cetera, paid ecosystems. So again, big gap here. I wouldn't call it free, but you have tens of thousands of creative assets sitting out there that not all tens of thousands of those are going to be a right fit for your brand, but But for most brands who we hear are suffering from a content deficit of just being, there's just not enough creative assets in the ecosystems to feed everything off of social in addition to social, we see it as a huge gap and a huge opportunity. And full disclosure, we don't even touch the actual paid buying ecosystem. But you see TikTok leading the way. YouTube and Instagram aren't far behind on building new ad products for creators. So again, it'll be another, we should see that 40% continue to grow for sure.
And I feel like that makes it easier to convert because we know like when you put in things in captions, like they don't want you out of that ecosystem. And so you can't really, taking how many steps to get somewhere can be difficult.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would add is, yes, these are all walled gardens and closed systems. They are focused on commerce, right? Whether that happen on platform or off. You especially see, everyone knows TikTok Shop. YouTube Shopping is kind of the premium side of shopping. Instagram Shopping, they tried and failed. We'll see what they come back with. But we do see many major retailers now building kind of a multi-layered approach, with commerce or affiliate being a really big area of growth. Again, this is a scale story. Somewhere between any given brand, somewhere between 1 in 10 and 1 in 20 creators will actually sell a product. So you can't launch a network with 20 creators and hope you sell a bunch of product. I mean, Amazon, Walmart, these types of brands, they are literally working with hundreds of thousands of creator affiliates. But think all the big box, think a lot of retail, a lot of fashion brands, they're also building that kind of layered approach. And typically the commerce creators who actually convert, they are your micro creators. Think tens of thousands of followers, not tens of millions of followers. But you need to build an army of them to be able to have the right model and the right scale to figure out who converts for you.
Now, like as it relates to AI, how is AI influencing all of this right now?
Yeah, like any industry, it's hugely critical. I'll break it down into, I think, 2 or 3 key areas. First and foremost, brand safety. So if there's a concern of this category, it is brand safety, brand suitability. You're working with humans on the other side. Whenever you have a human on the other side, there is a chance for screwing up. We've seen some very public cases. We've seen hundreds of millions of dollars of market cap get lost. So every single conversation we have with the Fortune 500 today starts with brand safety. This is not just a reactive approach. It's being proactive. It's understanding what's happening on social, off social, what creators are talking about. So think like transcripts, think about understanding logos and other things, but we're developing our brand safety solution with the likes of AB InBev, Disney, Coca-Cola. So, these brands that really are on opposite ends of the spectrum of what brand safety means to them, but are hugely focused on brand identity. So that's one area. 2 would be predictive performance, right? Helping you better understand what creators to work with, what performance outcomes are. Very different. You could analyze 1,000 creators. There'll be cohorts that can drive top of funnel. There'll be cohorts that will drive efficiencies mid funnel, and there'll be cohorts that will drive lower funnel. So helping brands understand predictive a little bit better. And then last but not least, I would just say agents, right? This is still a very human-centric industry. We're a workflow and insights platform. Each brand that we work with or agency work with, they have hundreds of users in the platform day in, day out. So how do we help them 10x what they're doing, make smarter decisions, et cetera?
And finally, since this is a quickie session, but I love those. Future trends, like what are you looking at that maybe we haven't talked about? Where do you see this all going?
Yeah, I teased it a little bit, but look, 99.9% of this is still on social platforms, on these walled gardens. In a way, we are very agnostic, right? We look across every major social platform today and really build the pipes to pull it into a single system. But that 0.1% of the ecosystem living outside of social has not been tapped. again, selfishly, we believe that creator content works really well, and not just well on social, but in other ads ecosystems. So how can we get better about being able to distribute and push this content outside of YouTube, outside of Instagram, into these other ads ecosystems for hopefully better performance. So that's one. And then two, just the kind of very tip of understanding how creator content works into MMMs, how we're measuring this against other ad formats. When I say it's like tip of the spear, we see very, very few brands really getting there. I think that'll change very quickly over the next couple of years, specifically around creator content. So the creator economy doesn't live alongside marketing advertising transformation. It's actually a part of it, at the center of it.
So it's like not just creator economy, it's the economy.
We hope so.
You know, it's not social media, it's just media. Okay, amazing. Well, give it up for Tim Sauvé. Check out Creator IQ. If you want to talk to him, he'll be around.
Yeah, I'll be around.
To do some biz. Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, both of you. I really appreciate it. As I mentioned to Tim and some others, I am going to continue to ensure that we have creator-focused content at all of our events because, as they said, the creator economy is just the economy. And I love that Tim also managed to work in MMMs into that conversation because that's the kind of nerdy stuff that we love. We are down to our last panel, and I like to say that we saved the best for last. We want you guys to pay attention because all content is not created equal. We talked a little bit about premium content. We talked about creators. Now we're actually going to talk with someone who has some skin in the attention game, among other things, as well as someone from a traditional media company to kind of talk about why all content's not created equal. Yeah?
Sort of.
No?
So it's almost like we planned this carefully, almost like we planned it, because I think this session follows beautifully on from the previous. So we've got two really good speakers. We wanted to have another debate about premium, and particularly to think a bit about what the attention lens tells us about the definition of premium content. And what better way to set it up than the previous panel? Thank you, both our speakers. That was awesome. So let's dive straight in. Sarah, what is premium?
Anything on Paramount, I think. Is that what it is? There we go.
The drinks now.
Done. Premium cocktails outside. Yeah, I think for us, premium is really about long form content, high quality production, and really giving advertisers the opportunity to own the space within the content. And I think from an advertising ecosystem perspective, agencies are interested in things like video completion rate, viewability, attention, that kind of really qualify the GRPs that are coming across linear and streaming.
Right, the hideous but incredibly obvious question. You heard our previous two speakers. How much of the creator economy would you say ticks your box? Obviously, a lot of it is short form, but then so is a lot of professionally produced content. Where is that blurred line? I mean...
Yeah, I think for us, when we think about shows like Yellowstone, Matlock, Tracker, they're reaching huge fan bases. So these creators are individually reaching, some level of fans, but I think the fandom of these kind of premium shows are really commanding a big audience. And I think that drives a lot of value for our advertisers. We're talking about brand, obviously, if we have strong programming, the rub for brands is really good. Yeah. So we want to really have that brand transference for the brands who are adjacent to that content.
And final question before we move on. Whenever we talk to buyers about this debate, the buyers say, oh, no, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. We don't want any big publisher telling us what premium is or isn't. We want to make that decision. And for some of our brands and marketers, premium is anything on Instagram, a beautiful environment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What's your take on that? Should buyers just decide? They clearly do.
They can't. I mean, they're the ones, deciding the premium value in terms of what they'll pay. I think, there's a consumer perspective of what the consumer will tolerate from a premium production. And then I do still think a lot of the metrics that are behind the value of a GRP, so things like, is the audience I'm hitting going to talk about the show and my brand? Are these influencers? Am I hitting the right audience? Is there co-viewing that kind of creates a community around the show? I think those are all part of the equation of how agencies are calculating their value of premium.
Okay, cool. Jan, welcome. Jan and I literally just spent more time than we've spent together in a long time.
Right, we're kind of meeting every day now.
Every day now. It's great. I love it. It was Venice last week, just in case anyone's wondering.
Passive and active meter, different topic. Yeah.
Different topic. So, Jan, with your attention lens, with a T-vision lens, what does premium mean? Can we really put an evidence base against the definition of premium?
Of course. So first of all, of course, everything on Paramount is premium. But in addition, right, like if you look at the kind of the video landscape, so you have those like tempo events, special live sports, right? These based on our measurement. For folks don't know who we are, so we're T-Vision. We have 5,000 homes. We have a passive meter. That meter basically really understand eyes on screen attention. So for those like a premium content, we do see a fairly high attention. If you look at the index, these are typically 50 to 70% higher than average. Then you have like in the streaming industry, you have the fast channel, right? They have maybe a couple hundred channels. These can be roughly average in terms of attention. Then you look another extreme, which is more like a long tail content. So I'm aware we are in the Google building, but there's a UGC platform, and we did analysis a couple months ago with New York Times. So there's a wide variety of the content on those platforms, and some of the content doesn't really get enough attention, right? I'm talking about not the typical creator economy stuff. These are genre like white noise, background music. Cat video is real, right? It's a genre, right? So nowadays, people really have to go back to office. What to do with your cat? You play a cat video for 8 hours. It's nonstop. Those video, I mean, based on our observation, there's no human attention, right? So there's a fairly wide spectrum of the attention based on the type of video.
Can we just unpack this a little bit? So, some years ago, I worked at a consulting firm called MTM, and we did a study for ThinkBox, which is the UK's VAB. And we were looking at the need states that different viewers had around their content consumption. And obviously, there's a very particular set of need states that YouTube satisfies brilliantly. How-to videos, if I want to make a banoffee pie, YouTube is a great place to go. Those videos command very high levels of attention. They're often dirt cheap. We did a very big exercise where we had video recording glasses, and we had 140 households, I think, where 3 people in the house recorded every minute of video they watched. And you see a lot of weird stuff. I mean, there was a woman who was very obsessed with pimple and blackhead squeezing videos. And every night before she went to bed, she would film herself watching all these YouTube videos of people squeezing zits. It was really strange. And when you sort of asked her, now she was paying a lot of attention to those videos. I'm not sure it was a premium environment for an advertiser, although obviously it doesn't take a rocket scientist to think about ads that might want to be near. Help us navigate this from an attention point of view. I guess where I'm going is there any actual or necessary relationship between budget and attention? Jan and then Sarah?
Yeah, so first of all, right, on YouTube, yes, how-to video, etc., does capture high attention. But I think the problem here is because we're not really using the attention lens enough. So people assume, okay, this is the one platform, and we assume certain attention level, right? But the content I mentioned, including kind of the white noise, sleeping sound, if you aggregate, that's close to 30% of the viewership. And this content is just by definition doesn't get enough attention, right? So I do believe that if you able to measure every single content, use the lens of attention, the reality and the perception is quite different.
Right.
And by doing so, there's arbitrage opportunity on the buy side, and there's certainly opportunity on the sell side to tell a better story and create a better narrative.
I think I follow. Sarah, attention versus budget, no necessary relationship?
I think it's important. I mean, we measure all of our tent poles. We obviously have a partnership with TVision.
Right.
We just came off the VMAs, which were the highest rated in 4 years, and this year's VMAs commanded more attention than the past 3.
Right.
So we're seeing, the value really play itself out in terms of viewers paying attention to not only the content, not only the ads, but sponsored integrations, which are part of the show, which we see have an even higher level of attention than the ads or the programming itself.
So you think it's not a uniform relationship, but there is a relationship between big budget tentpoles and attention?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone in the audience disagree? Does anyone think, is anyone bewildered or struggling a little bit with that part of the debate? Is everyone desperate for a large beer? Are you all waiting? I think they're waiting around. Let's push on. Okay, so Jan, next question then. What's the evidence that advertising against high-value premium content delivers a superior return to advertisers than, say, spray and pay against short-form UGC on whichever network you choose?
Sure. First, from attention point of view, in terms of the duration of attention, the long-form premium video has almost 10x more attentive seconds compared to those short-form social platform. Then, okay, the next question is how does those duration of attention translate into outcome, right? So we have done many studies. We've done some study with ARF and CIMM, etc. So there's a clear correlation between the duration of attention into the outcome, no matter it's the brand outcome or it's the search or it's the sales, there's a strong correlation. And this is kind of common sense, right? Because if you're running some ads in front of like an empty room, right? No matter how amazing is your content, I just don't know which kind of outcome you will get. So there's a correlation between attention and outcome. I think the interesting thing we started to understand is depends on type of brands, depends on different kind of industry, depends on different kind of brands and the product. There's a different relationship between attention and outcome. But in general, I mean, of course, the higher attention drives better outcome.
Is it fair to say that there's not a straight line between attention and outcomes, but it's very hard to drive good outcomes with limited attention?
Yeah, if there's no attention, I don't think there's any
You're not
outcome.
going to get much. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think attention is table stakes. So presence of person in room, number of people in the room, these are all critical and important for our advertising partners to know about. So I think, from our lens, we also think measuring the attribution is very important as well, the outcomes measurement. So we have tools to do that as well. But I think from a media metrics perspective and to be able to quantify large data sets, lots of content across multiple platforms, attention is a great way to start.
So can I ask you, you're very leaned into your relationship with TVision, and it's interesting. I think when myself and Evan and Tamika have been navigating the attention debate, one thing we found is that there's been historically quite a lot of sell-side anxiety about attention metrics.
Really? I never heard of that.
No. But you seem to have got over your anxiety and have now consummated a relationship with an attention provider. Why?
Why did we do it, Jan? I don't know. I think, again, qualifying our GRPs are important to us. So being able to demonstrate beyond just how many people we reached, who was that audience? What were they doing? Were they paying attention? Were they in the room? I think we do get questions from advertisers about attention. So that's, driving a lot of our relationship as well, to have a partner who can do that. So yeah, I think it's been a great tool in our repertoire to kind of go beyond just a viewership metric or demographic composition.
Does it occasionally tell you stuff you don't desperately want to hear? We have this amazing show. The budget was huge. The cast was brilliant. The script was amazing. But everyone sat in the room and paid no attention to it. It bored them. So we've got that wrong.
It never tells us that. No, I mean, I think, sometimes, it's a multitude of metrics that we're providing back to clients. So something may not have the best attention depending on the genre or the day part in which it airs, but that, programming might have, a great viewership story or a great website conversion story. So I think we're really thinking about attention as a tool in the repertoire to report back to our advertisers.
Okay. So Jan, jumping back to you, I guess the other part of this debate, of course, is about the various factors that make up attention. So clearly there are quite different characteristics across genres. You know, high engagement sports content where your team is having their ass kicked versus, you know, whatever it might happen to be, some of the low attention formats you mentioned. Platform makes a difference. You know, size of screen makes a difference. Give us a sense of how these bits fit together.
Sure. So in terms of attention, first we have the content attention, the ad attention, and I think ad attention in general, especially buy-side people are most interested in because that's the piece they're buying. And in terms of the relationship, clearly the content attention has the biggest influence on the ad attention because if the content is not good enough, I mean, everybody will just simply leave the room right during the commercial break. But one thing we started to learn, I think this is extremely exciting in the CTV space, is through the ad innovation, you definitely can keep audience attention and drive higher attention. For example, I mean, now pretty much every single publisher is doing pause ads or different sorts of new kind of picture-in-picture and the bunch of stuff, right? And all this content, I mean, I cannot say all, but typically those innovative ad format can drive better attention. That's quite interesting. Also, if you make the ad part duration shorter, typically that's the case for most of the streaming platform. Typically you can increase attention. So we found that there's definitely a huge potential for publisher to use ad innovation to drive higher attention in addition to the content strategy.
Do you see big differences between different genres?
Genre is definitely a huge factor, and also whether it's a live or time-shifted or on-demand content, that's also a huge factor. In the traditional linear space, if you time shift it, there's also a huge chance people just gonna skip those ads. So yes, that's a factor. But I have to say that I think the content is still the biggest factor. Then the second will be how to deliver that ad.
Right,
it's very important.
Yeah, I'll add. So we have a Paramount Brand Studio team that creates ad units on behalf of our partners, and you know we've partnered with TVision to look at those ad units, and certainly contextually relevant ads within the environment that they're running tend to do much better. And so I think that is definitely a finding for us and validates the work that we're doing on behalf of our advertisers.
Interesting. So let's think a bit about the future. Sarah, do you think our concepts of what premium means are going to change as content creation and production becomes increasingly democratized in the era of cheap HD cameras, AI tools for special effects, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I mean, I feel like there is just so much content out there that it's hard to think of more that will be available to folks. I do think there is a world where, you know, content coming from linear is faster to streaming, which I think will be an interesting play. I think those windows have gotten kind of shorter over time. And obviously sports within streaming has grown in terms of its ability to, you know, airing the Super Bowl and whatnot really works for streaming as well. So I think the tenets that folks will measure premium on will continue to maintain, and it's all the things that talk about, you know, not only the content itself, but certainly the ad environment. And I think that is core, and maybe we haven't talked about that yet, but the you know, mobile is different than CTV inherently, and the way that ads are getting served across different streaming partners is vastly different. So I think that being, you know, very much aware of those differences and what it means for your ad to really land to the consumer.
Cool. Jan, final question for you then. Do you think, looking forwards for the rest of this decade, that we're going to see the growing use of attention metrics to really shift how investment plans are made, how dollars are spent in the advertising environment? Obviously, it's probably worth saying, and there's a shout out for Jan. Jan was very instrumental in the partnership between the Attention Council and CIMM. And a massive thank you to you and to Mark from Adelaide. We will be running an open meeting of that new group in early December to talk a bit about how we can collaborate with the rest of the industry and what our priorities should be as we look to help support and define the attention space, building on the work of the IAB, the ARF, and many, many others. But Jan, when you think about the material role of attention how big an impact is it going to have in the rest of this decade?
I think it's really already happening. So we started this almost 10 years ago, right? And initially, it's really the marketers came to us and that they heard we got this interesting panel, interesting data, and that they really believe there's an arbitrage opportunity between the typical viewership and the quality of the viewership, i.e. attention. And then we did maybe this was 7-8 years ago, right? We did analysis on the linear TV. We found that there's almost no correlation between the ratings and the attention. That was interesting because people believe that, oh, this show has very high rating, must be very kind of engaging content. It's not necessarily true, right? Then I think those marketers started to understand that, okay, so actually there's an arbitrage opportunity because the attentive ratings are not baked into the pricing yet. So they can take advantage of that, right? That was linear. I think the most exciting thing for me is really the programmatic, right? The future, no matter it's CTV or digital, because in linear, yes, still it's a bit harder to do optimization, activation, but in the programmatic space, you can do that in real time. And attention is a matrix. You can apply that into the bid stream, and you can really use attention to analyze every single piece of inventory in a uniform way, right? And that's quite attractive, and that means you can make this into pre-bid, you can build a PMP around it. I think that will further, right, push the attention use case, and eventually I hope the value of basically the attentive impression will become the main driver when you think about the budget allocation and the campaign performance.
It's super interesting. And it feels, when you describe it that way, it feels like a very logical extension of the world of measurement, it seems to me. It's not just about bums on seats, TVs on in households. If no one's paying attention, then there's an issue. Sarah, final question for you. Is a channel or service that's been optimized for attention going to be a fun place to hang out as a viewer?
I'm sorry.
Is a channel or service optimized for attention going to be a fun place to hang out as a viewer? I have this slightly uncomfortable anticipation that there'll be a lot of very shouty things happening on the screen and lots of jump shocks and, pay attention, so on, this sort of stuff.
Yeah, hopefully that's not the way it goes. But yeah, no, I think, the tenets of good attentive driving programming, sports, obviously being one of them, live events, really commanding, that feeling of you don't want to leave the room when you go to commercial because you want to be there right when the content starts again. So hopefully no shouting, but just delivering on programming that folks want to stay in their seats for.
We are clearly very, very close to attention-powered televisions, which will literally shout at the viewer and tell you to wake up, pay attention, watch the content. It's coming, 2030, guaranteed. Sarah, Jan, a massive thank you to the two of you for our final panel. Ladies and gentlemen, thus concludeth CIMM West. That is a wrap. So I just want to say a couple of very quick thank yous. First of all, to Marzena, India, and Chris, who've done their usual amazing job in herding the cats and organizing a great set of speakers and attendees. A huge thank you to our friends at Google for hosting us in this glorious venue. We certainly hope to be back. Thank you to all of our amazing speakers and panelists who I have to say have informed, entertained, and occasionally inspired. And then lastly, a very big shout out to Tamika Key, the power behind the programming throne, and our partner in crime, Evan Cohen, newly on board at CIMM. So there are beverages outside, I believe. So make your way there. We've paid for them, so you have to drink them. Thank you. We'll see you at the next CIMM event.